Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at function expressions in JavaScript. And let's create a function in the most kind of basic way. So this is called a function definition, which we've already seen in this course. We write function, and let's create a function that maybe just says hello. So let's write function, I'll call it greet1, round brackets and curly brackets. So we can use numbers in function names and variable names. We just can't start them with a number. So this is a valid function name. I'm calling it greet1 because I'm going to have another two of these, and I don't want to have to think of completely different names every time. So I can have greet1, greet2 and greet3. And let's just write console.log and we'll output hello1 here. How do I actually call this function? And when I say call the function, this is programming lingo for make the function actually execute. And the answer is we just write greet1, the name of it, two round brackets, and we should put the semicolon in really. So if I run this now, it says hello1. So we've already seen this, and this is called a function definition. Now one thing to be aware of is that the Node.js interpreter or the JavaScript interpreter, whichever one you're using, it will normally start at the top basically and read downwards. So it's reading downwards, it sees your function definition, and eventually it comes, if you've got one, to a function call. So now we're calling this function, and by the time we do that, it's already seen the definition of the function, so it works. However, we can also, in this case, put the call to the function above the definition of the function. So we can call the function before we've defined it, as long as we do define it in our program. Let's try that. And it actually does work. And this is called function hoisting, which is a name that I discovered recently. I didn't know it was called that, but this does actually work with a function definition. But as we'll see, it doesn't work with the other styles of creating a function that we're going to see. So the second way to create a function is called a function expression. We write we need a variable here essentially, which will actually be a reference to the function rather than just a simple value. So let's call this greet2, and I'm going to set it equal to, and we need a keyword function. Then we have the round brackets as always and the curly brackets as always. And in there I'm going to do console.log hello2. So we can call that, same as before, we have the name of the function, two round brackets, and ideally a semicolon. So if I run this, it says hello2, if you can see that. That works. However, function hoisting doesn't work with function expressions. It only works with function definitions. So if I try to call this function before I define it with a function expression, then I get a nasty looking error. And it says actually on the top line, it says cannot access greet2 before initialization. Let's put this back down here so that it actually works. So here we've got function definition, and here we've got function expression. We've got a function expression. Why is it called a function expression? Well, probably because in programming in general, an expression is something that evaluates to some value. For example, if I write 2 plus 2, that evaluates to the value 4. In this case, this expression evaluates to a function which we can assign to a variable, and then we can call the function. So this is a function expression, whereas this is a function definition. There's another way of writing a function expression that seems to be getting more and more common. I'm seeing it a lot in React code. React is a framework for creating basically web user interfaces. Let's take a look at that. So again, we have a variable to store a reference to the function. I'll call this greet3, and we set it equal to, and now instead of the function keyword, we have two round brackets, which again could accept a list of arguments. We could put a parameter list in there, and we have a equals sign and a sort of right angle bracket, sort of diamond bracket, and then we have the curly brackets. So let's put in there console.log hello3. So to call or invoke this greet3 function, we write again greet3 and around brackets. And if I run this, it says hello3. So there are these three different ways of defining a function. These are three important ways of defining a function. If you are a beginner, you will start to get lost just by looking at this. It's really important that you type all of this out and try it out for yourself, and try to give yourself an exercise. Now, or some exercises rather. In each case, we could supply function parameters. We could put function parameters in the round brackets. That's where they always go. And then we could pass those to the functions in our curly brackets here when we call the functions. We'll take a look at that in the next video. But if you think you understand how this might work, then do try it out. So you have to give yourself exercises of some kind. So for example, can you write a function that adds up all the numbers from 1 to 100 and then just prints them out, or else returns the value that it's calculated? Make up some silly exercises. They don't have to be anything really serious or useful, but make up exercises and try to practice all of these. Try adding up sequences of numbers, or squaring numbers like I've done here, or whatever springs to your mind, converting a temperature in Celsius to a temperature in Fahrenheit, converting a number of days to a number of months, whatever you like. Make up exercises and try to do them. You've got to practice this stuff to learn it. So in the next video, we'll take a look at how we would handle return values and parameters with these different ways of creating functions. But do practice this or you will start to get lost. So until next time, happy coding. Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at working with parameters and return values with different ways of defining functions. So in the last video we took a look at function definitions and expressions, different ways of creating functions in JavaScript. If you've watched that video, hopefully you've practiced this a bit so that it's starting to seem familiar to you. In this video we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to bring in parameters and return values. So let's maybe write functions that calculate factorials. So the factorial of a number is defined like this. Let's say we have, for example, 3 factorial. So we write it like this. So that's 3 factorial. What does it mean? Well, it's equal to 3 times 2 times 1. So you can guess that, for example, 5 factorial equals 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Not that it makes any difference, it's multiplying by 1. This is a simple idea from mathematics. Can we write a function that calculates this? And you might want to pause the video and have a go at it and see if you can do it, because it's a good little exercise. Okay, so let's start by creating a function using a function definition. And the way we do that is we have function, we have a name for it, let's call it factorial1, because I'm going to have more of these. And we have round brackets and curly brackets. We want to pass a single argument to this function, and that's going to be the number that we calculate the factorial for, like 3 or 5 or whatever. So let's give that a name. We could call it, for example, value. And then we can write the function. So we're going to have to iterate over all the different values, sort of counting up to this actual value. Let's try it. It's actually easier to do this by writing a function that calls itself, but we won't look at that just yet. That's called recursion. Let's do it using a loop. So I'm going to have for let's call this maybe n, because it's like a number. N equals 1, although we don't really have to bother with 1, strictly speaking, we keep going while n is less than or equal to value, and then we increment n. So we start off setting the value of n to 1. We're going to keep looping until it's equal to the value that we pass in, and we'll also loop for that, but when it's more than the value, we'll stop. So when this condition's false and n is not less than or equal to the value, then we don't loop anymore, and then we increment n every time we go around the loop. So for a start, let's just do console.log n and see what values we get for n when we call this function. And it's a really good thing to do to build up your programs bit by bit and check them along the way. Use console.log to check that they're actually working as you expect at each particular step. Don't write a load of code and then just run it, because that can get confusing. Write little bits and check that they're working. So let's call factorial. So we write the name of it, factorial 1, and we pass in some value like 3. So we expect this to print out 1, 2, 3. Let's see if it works. So if I run this, what do I actually call it? Let's write node function expression parameters.js, and we get 1, 2, 3. So it seems like it's working okay. Let's try it for 5. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And yeah, I just altered the wrong thing there. So I want to pass in 5 when I call the function. Unfortunately, I have trouble seeing over my microphone. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's working. What we have to do is multiply all those values by each other. You know, it doesn't matter what order we do them in. So 3 times 2 times 1 is of course the same as 1 times 2 times 3. And we could start this at 2, it makes no difference, but just to make it look a bit simpler, I'll start it at 1. Alright, so let's have a variable. Let's write let, and I'll call this factorial equal 1, maybe. In fact, let's change this to 2, because the thought of it being 1 pointlessly sort of annoys me. And then what we have to do here is say, so we want to say factorial equals factorial times n. And then when we finish, we can display it console.log factorial. Let's see if it's what we expect. So for 5, we get 120, which I think is correct. Let's try 4. 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So 4 times 3, what's that? It should be 24, I think. Let's run it. 24. Let's try it for 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So it's working. We've got the value that we want, but we want to return it rather than display it. So if we return it, let's say return factorial. And when we actually call the function, we can now get a return value. So let's say let result 1, I'll call it, equal factorial 1 of 3. So notice the function's called factorial 1, and I've got a variable here called factorial, so those are 2 different names. And let's do console.log result 1, and I'll try it for 4. So if we run it, we get 24. Now there is a bit of a twist here with factorial, which is that by definition factorial of 0 is supposed to be 1. And this isn't going to work with factorial 0, or is it? Let's try it. So if I say factorial 0, we get 1. So I've started factorial at the value 1, and then the loop doesn't execute at all. So it does actually work. Otherwise, I would have put an if in here to check if value is 0 at the start and then just returned 1. But this works anyway. All right, so let's look at doing this using function expressions. And if you've watched the last video and you think you can probably actually work out how to do it, then do go ahead and have a go. Pause the video and try it. So let's write let factorial 2, and this time I'll use a function expression. So we write equals function, we have round brackets and curly brackets. In the round brackets we put our comma separated list of parameters. In this case we just have one parameter, and then we have to do these calculations. So normally you try not to duplicate code in a program, but here we're just doing the same thing 3 different ways just for demonstration purposes. So I just copy this code, it's going to be the same. And don't forget the indentation, and you should be able to run, I think it's Option Shift F or Alt Shift F to run the auto formatter. On my Mac it's Option Shift F, I'm guessing Windows Alt Shift F. Probably there's also a menu option here somewhere, but you want to make sure, look it up if you can't figure it out, but you want to make sure that you can run auto format in your in Visual Studio Code. Make sure it works and use it a lot. I recommend it. But try to write well formatted code to start with. This is incredibly important. Okay, so now we've defined a function using a function expression, and we can write let result 2 equal factorial 2, and let's pass in 5. Should get 120, and then we can write console.log 5. And something went wrong. What did I do wrong? Yeah, console.log 5. I meant result 2. Okay. There we go, we've got 120. We could also do this like this. So I could write console.log and factorial, let's call one of these functions like factorial 2, doesn't matter which one, and pass in 4 or something. So if I write this, so this is actually calling the function and then passing the result immediately to console.log, just without the intermediate variable that we have here. So this also works. If I run this, we're getting 24 down there. And finally, using the other form of what is essentially a function expression again, let's write let factorial 3. So I have to give it a different name, so I'm just going 1, 2, 3 at the end of the function name here, equals, and this time we have round brackets, an arrow, and curly brackets. So basically we've got an arrow instead of the keyword function is the difference, and the order is slightly different, but it's pretty much the same as this one, and it is another kind of function expression. So if I just copy the content of this and paste it in, and let's call it, and this time I won't bother with the intermediate variable to get the value. I'll just write console.log factorial 3, and let's pass in 6, which should be 6 times 120. What is that? 720? Let's try it. Okay, so I did something wrong there. What did I do wrong? Let's check. I forgot to add value as a parameter. So I want to be able to pass 6 to it. Got to have a parameter here. Let's try that. Yeah, we get 720. All right, so it's all working. And as I say, if you're a beginner, this is the first time you've seen this, you really do need to practice this. Give yourself, little challenges, add up lists of numbers or whatever. You can pass arrays to functions as well and return arrays. You just pass in the name of the array and you can, just return the array. That works perfectly well. But practice all of this. Make some challenges up for yourselves. Practice all 3 styles with parameters. You can have more than one parameter, of course. You could have a comma separated list of parameters with various different names here. Try it all out and practice it, or you will get lost pretty quickly. So we're going to look at some other concepts in this course, and I want to get fairly soon to looking at what we can do with JavaScript in terms of actually things like running web servers and just sort of generally interacting with the world beyond the console on the computer, essentially. But we're probably going to have to look at some more stuff first. So the key to this is practice. Type it all out, try it all out, experiment with it a little bit, and then you're hopefully not going to get lost, but you will if you just watch the videos. Okay, so until next time, happy coding.